I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And this week we're going to be diving into the Best Lead Actor category, a very fascinating category, a category that you may think has a clear frontrunner, but I think there are actually a couple of actors that could steal that away. We'll talk about all that in this week's episode. But if you're new to the series, what I do every single week is pick a different Oscar category and I do a deep dive on it and I break it down and I predict what I think is going to get nominated. We do that all the way up until the Oscar nominations. Then when the Oscars come out, of course, we try to predict what's going to win. But not only do we do the Oscars, we also like to do an occasional bonus episodes as we get closer into the Oscar season. I'm talking about Golden Globes, SAG, BAFTA, predictions, reactions, ultimately to see how they will affect the Oscar race, because that's the big one. That's the big one we cover on this channel. But nowhere on YouTube will you find 8 years of Oscar content that does the deep dives that we do, even into the technical categories, even to the smaller ones. Nowhere on YouTube can you find that. That's why you come here for reliable, consistent predictions and nominations. But at the end of the day, it comes down to you. I give you my thoughts and my suggestions, but I also try to give you as much information as possible so you can make the most accurate and informed Oscar predictions. So, jumping into things, starting off with my first prediction, I'm going to go with Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer. Of course, the smash hit of the summer, dominated the box offices there alongside Barbie, but I also think will dominate the Oscars, at least in terms of nominations. I expect above-the-line nominations for the acting categories, but also a bunch of technical nominations, probably where it's going to get its most awards. I'm sure many of you watching this video have already seen the film, so you know that this performance is a tortured performance, a sort of mysterious performance, a very involved performance, a great performance by Cillian Murphy playing the J. Robert Oppenheimer, a nuclear physicist responsible for the Manhattan Project and the introduction of the nuclear bomb. So Murphy's got a lot going for him. Not only is he, I think, a respected actor, I think I almost liken him to someone like a Daniel Day-Lewis with that sort of Irish heritage, in that he seems European and sophisticated, interesting, and very sort of eloquent, reserved, not a big celebrity, so, allows his work to speak for him, sort of shy and reserved in those instances. But I think at this point, because of the success of something like Peaky Blinders, and then of course this film has a great deal of respect. I mean, even since the press tour for this movie, you have big name actors like Robert Downey Jr. and Matt Damon talking about how great his performance was in the film, and I think there is an equal amount of respect. That's what I'm sort of getting from the community and Oscar voters, that there's a lot of respect for this kind of performance and this movie. And he has a sort of prototypical type of a winner. If you look at the past winners, particularly for this lead category, we have a lot of real life people. Freddie Mercury, Winston Churchill, just a couple years ago with Will Smith with King Richard, playing Richard Williams. So the Oscars like actors playing real life people, so the same sort of instance here. It's not necessarily a transformative performance, but it is, I would say, a tortured performance, which, the past few winners of the last decade really are either you're playing a real life person or you're tortured. So you're either playing Winston Churchill or you're Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant, or you're Joaquin Phoenix in Joker, and there's, a great deal amount of effort that you're putting on screen. I think Oppenheimer and Murphy's performance in the film has a bit of the both, so it is a sort of prototypical winner. My one concern in terms of a possible win is just because Murphy doesn't seem like the type of personality to do a lot of campaigning and do a lot of parties and whatnot, so he'd have to sort of get on from the fact of the love and appreciation for the movie. And then also, if Robert Downey Jr. is potentially going to win for Best Supporting Actor, does the Academy also feel the need to give it to Cillian for Best Lead Actor? Stuff like that's going to be interesting to see as the Oscar race unfolds, but he's without a doubt going to get that nomination because of the success of the film, how well liked I expect it to be, and then also I think the amount of respect that he has, plus the prototypical type of performance that he's giving, oftentimes not only gets nominated for Oscars, but wins. Then my number 2 selection, I'm going to go with Bradley Cooper for Maestro, which I think is a potential sneaky number 2 for the win. I think a lot of people sort of see this race as Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer as a guarantee, but there is some concerns for me, like I mentioned, particularly that campaigning, which I think is actually maybe Bradley Cooper's strength. Let's not forget, Bradley Cooper has been nominated 9 times at the Oscars. He's been nominated 4 times for acting, so he's sort of seen as a sort of filmmaking auteur and committed to the craft of film, where someone like Cillian Murphy, he's mostly known, I think, for his TV work in Peaky Blinders, and of course other films and whatnot, Sunshine and 28 Days Later. So he does have that, respect. But Cooper is a multiple-time past nominee, so the Oscars like him, and guess what? Bradley Cooper loves the Oscars as well. He's one of those guys that will campaign. He's one of those guys that will sort of do the Q&As and talk about his vision. So in terms of a possible win, he's got that going for him. But at least in terms of the nomination, let's talk about that, because that's what the show is ultimately about. He got a lot of the hallmarks, of course, even more so than Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer. Where here, Bradley Cooper's playing an even more famous person in Leonard Bernstein, and does the sort of prosthetic makeup and goes from young person to an old person, does the sort of full gamut of range. He's also, of course, directing this movie, so there's a bit of even more an authorship to that. But the sort of transformative type of roles that got Rami Malek a win for Bohemian Rhapsody, that got Gary Oldman a win for Darkest Hour, is the same sort of performance that Bradley Cooper's giving in the sort of heavy prosthetics, unrecognizable. Still, you sort of understand it's him, but he is wearing, prosthetics, particularly as he goes into his older age. He starts to become more unrecognizable to the Bradley Cooper we know. I expect this movie to perform similarly to A Star is Born in that it gets the acting awards, screenplay, picture, not a lot of technical love, but probably some technical love. The question whether or not is, did people think maybe A Star is Born was a fluke and they didn't want to reward him there, and now they want to do it this year? It's going to be interesting to see, but I think Maestro is one of these sort of dark horse contenders that's outside of the top 5 for Best Picture for a lot of people, but next thing we know, I think, is a real possibility of winning both Best Lead Actor and Best Lead Actress because of that sort of transformational performance, because it's a biopic. It is the type of performance that usually wins, or at the very least gets nominated, so I expect Bradley Cooper to get a nomination. Then my third pick is going to be Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon. And you may say, Connor, number 3 for Leo, that's a little bit low, isn't it? As a matter of fact, it may be a little bit too high. There's some concerns with me for this performance. I still have it at number 3 because I think it's going to get nominated, but I think it's going to get nominated because of the strength of the film and the strength of DiCaprio as a brand name and as an actor. Coming out of Cannes, I think a lot of the reviews were like, Martin Scorsese, he's done it again, another big American masterpiece. It was a lot of Scorsese, and then the breakout actor was Lily Gladstone. She was sort of the big one in the film. And so there was a little bit of concern when I started to read the reviews. It was like, well, is Leonardo DiCaprio really great in the film? And yes, he's good in it, and I'm sure he'll get nominated. That was sort of the vibe I was reading from the reviews. And then it sort of dawned on me that I think Killers of the Flower Moon may place similarly in terms of nominations as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you remember that movie, Leonardo DiCaprio, he got nominated, another auteur-driven movie, but it was actually his co-star, Brad Pitt, that took all of the appreciation. I think this year it's going to be Lily Gladstone taking sort of all the appreciation and maybe winning for this movie from another sort of, like Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, auteur, established name brand. And Leonardo DiCaprio was great in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and he got nominated, but everyone was talking about Brad Pitt in that movie. He was sort of the big one that ultimately got the Oscar. Similarly here, I think it's going to happen with Killers of the Flower Moon. And that's in part just because Leo also doesn't really do a lot of campaigning anymore. He did back in the early days, and then he got his Oscar for The Revenant, and then we saw it with the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood campaign. He did some press early on for the release, but in terms of the campaigning of the movie, we didn't see him too much. He didn't think he could win, and he got nominated, but didn't really have any shot of winning. I think that's going to be a similar situation here where people respect DiCaprio as an actor. Every time he puts something out, he gets nominated because he's very well respected. And the movie I expect to be heavily nominated as well, but I think he's going to ride more so on his name brand and the success of the movie more so than it was like a wow, DiCaprio's best performance, even though I'm sure some people will believe that. And it's not also, I do want to mention, he'll probably get nominated as well because it's not a traditional hero type performance. He isn't sort of as good looking. He sort of is a little bit dim-witted in the film, and it's a different type of role that he hasn't always played before. So it's an interesting little bit of a twist on that as well. So he has, some transformation within his performance, although I don't think it's going to be showy enough to either win, but enough to get a nomination. And then my fourth pick, I'm going to go with Paul Giamatti in The Holdovers. Now, this is a performance I've seen in a movie I've seen, so maybe I'm overrating this because some people don't even have Giamatti in their top 5. But I'm going to try to convince you in this episode why I actually think not only is he a top 5 contender, I think he's closer to a lock than some people think. First of all, The Holdovers, I expect to be a well-nominated film, particularly above the line. I expect it to be nominated for Best Picture, maybe even Best Director too. It is a movie that will appeal to the Academy. I mean, I've been watching Oscar movies and analyzing them for 8 years now, so I know the types of movies that the Oscars like, and this is the type of movie that they like. Makes you feel good, warm, funny, but also dramatic. A classic sort of prestige type picture, but it's still not too artsy to appreciate it. So there's definitely going to have mass appeal for this film. But also, if you look at the track record of Alexander Payne, the director of the film, in 2013, his film got nominated for Best Picture Nebraska, and Bruce Dern, the lead actor of that movie, got nominated in this category. Same thing with George Clooney in 2011. The Descendants got nominated for Best Picture, and Clooney got nominated for Best Lead Actor. I mean, even if you want to go back to Sideways in 2004, another Alexander Payne movie, he got 2 acting nominations for Supporting Actor and Supporting Actress. So we have a movie that I expect to be well nominated from a track record from a director who, when his movies get nominated for a Best Picture, he gets acting nominations from the performances in his films. And then also, just from a subjective point of view, I think Giamatti is sort of in the stature that the Oscars start to recognize. And I mean that by, they usually don't recognize the younger actors. It's pretty rare for a young actor to get nominated. Or if it's in between a young actor and older actor, they're going to reward the older actor in terms of nominations, but also in terms of wins. There is a sort of weird thing where you have to earn it. Leonardo DiCaprio has to be nominated 5 times before he can win for The Revenant. You have to sort of earn it. And Paul Giamatti, in many ways, he was nominated in 2006, but he is at this point, I think, where he's done enough film and television work that he's an established character actor, a name brand, people recognize him, and also people respect him. So now he's in a movie that's potentially nominated for Best Picture, whose character makes you feel really good. He's a bit of a curmudgeon at the beginning, but as he starts to develop this relationship with this kid in this New England prep school, you start to understand more of his motivations and his backstory. And at the end of the movie, you feel good, and you walk out feeling, fulfilled, and you feel real kinship and connection to his character. He also sort of has this prosthetic lazy eye in the film. And so he doesn't look just like Giamatti. He has this sort of weird, odd aspect and energy that only Giamatti can bring. So I do think, subjectively, this is not analysis necessarily. Of course, we have the track record of someone like an Alexander Payne, but just the type of role it is, the type of performance it is. As someone who's seen the film, I can tell you that it's the type of Oscar performance that usually gets nominated, makes you feel good, bit of a lovable character. And I think Giamatti, maybe you disagree in the comments down below, let me know, but it feels like to me that Giamatti has sort of entered into the status of established character actor, respected, who will get nominated, and it does feel like, it doesn't feel like, oh, is he a little bit too young? I mean, he's done enough work that they feel like he's deserved this sort of nomination. In this weird way, the Oscars do like to sort of approach that in terms of their nominations. So I think Giamatti has entered into that class. I think that will also push him over the edge for the nomination. Then my 5th pick, I'm going to go with Colman Domingo for Rustin. And Rustin is the latest movie from George C. Wolfe. George C. Wolfe, his last movie, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, got both Viola Davis and Chadwick Boseman nominations at the Oscars in the lead acting categories. So that's a little bit of a great sign for Colman Domingo in the movie playing gay rights activist Bayard Rustin. It's a very involved performance. If you've seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, you would understand the type of performance that this is. It's lots of speeches, and really the movie is centered around Rustin and the character. And I think Colman Domingo, not only does he have this movie, but he also has The Color Purple, in which he plays a supporting role. I don't think he's going to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor for that film, but he's in another movie that people will like in the Oscars, so that's another bonus sign for him for this movie. But I think because this is the more involved movie, the lead movie, dynamic performance, Colman Domingo is also an actor who's been in and around a possible nomination for the past couple of years. He has gained some respect and some critical appreciation, so it wouldn't be crazy to see the Oscars also nominate him here. And then also, let's not forget that this movie is being distributed by Netflix. And as I mentioned on last week's episode, the SAG Awards are going to be displayed on Netflix. In past years, the SAGs have shown a lot of respect and appreciation for Netflix movies. I mean, they nominated Adam Sandler in Hustle for last year, a bunch of nominations for The Good Nurse last year as well. So generally, SAG members like Netflix movies. The question this year being, well, is there going to be a SAG Awards? Because, recent negotiations haven't gone as well as some had hoped. So as of the time of this recording, there hasn't been any resolution, and potentially maybe aren't going to be SAG Awards this year. But let's say there are, because that's a huge awards body and an indicator for the Oscars for us. So let's say he gets nominated for SAG. Well, if he gets nominated at Critics' Choice, which, by the way, there's 6 nominations at Critics' Choice, so he could definitely get in there. Now, all of a sudden, he gets nominated for SAG because his movie is released by Netflix, and they like Netflix movies. and SAG likes Netflix movies, so he gets nominated for SAG. Now he gets nominated for Critics' Choice, and let's say he misses BAFTA. Are you still going to bet against him? Sometimes, like we mentioned on last week's episode, you have to look further down the road, and I think this involved performance from a Netflix movie that could potentially even get SAG and Critics' Choice, I think that would be enough of a wins. Obviously, there's no guarantees, but I think if he gets both those, like I expect him to do, I expect him to ultimately get nominated at the Oscars. So I'm starting to think ahead a bit and thinking the most logical instance, and this makes sense for Colman Domingo. Plus, I don't think Rustin's going to get nominated for Best Picture. Well, why does that matter? Because you have to go 10 years ago to 2013 to find a year in which all 5 of the best lead actors, their movies were also nominated for Best Picture. If you look at the past couple years even, there was an average of only 2 of the nominees in this category having their movie nominated for Best Picture. I mean, look at Brendan Fraser just last year, won for The Whale, even though The Whale wasn't nominated for Best Picture, which indicates to me, like the Best Lead Actors category we identified as well, that the actors don't necessarily need to love your movie to love your performance. As a matter of fact, almost every year there's at least one performance that's not nominated for Best Picture, because guess what? It's just a really great performance. It doesn't matter that it's in an okay movie. The actors branch of the Academy will still vote for the performance. So it would be weird if I put Jeffrey Wright in here, or even Andrew Scott for All the Strangers, because those movies have a strong shot at getting nominated for Best Picture. So then you're saying, well, now I'm thinking all 5 of my nominees are going to get nominated for Best Picture. That hasn't happened for 10 years pretty much. So I think when you're looking at your 5, you want to have some naturally that will nominate for Best Picture. I mean, Cillian Murphy's Oppenheimer is going to get nominated. Bradley Cooper-Maestro is probably going to get nominated. But in your 4th and 5th slots, keep that in mind. Maybe I should put someone in here like Andrew Scott for All the Strangers. But then also, if I am going to do that, maybe I don't put All the Strangers in for my Best Picture nominations. Just something to think about. Then talking about my possible contenders, like I just mentioned, Andrew Scott for All the Strangers. This is a classic kind of a small, independent, moving performance from a relatively new actor. He's done lots of work in the theater and on TV, but in terms of films, Andrew Scott is still relatively new to the Oscars, which is why I'm actually leaving him on the outside. Everything we know from this movie, it's a very involved performance, very sort of commanding, powerful. If the emotional connection of the film really resonates with you, he's going to be the guy that you sort of come away with going like, wow, who is that guy? In the same way that his co-star in the film, Paul Mescal, I think had that similar reception from After Sun last year, and he got nominated for that film. That being said, I don't want to, it's a strong number 6, but my concerns are that he's maybe a little bit too new in the film world, that he hasn't earned the sort of respect of the Academy, that he's maybe a little bit too young. Are they going to go with him or someone like a Paul Giamatti or Colman Domingo, who have sort of quote-unquote earned, their career in terms of consistent year-over-year great performances for many years? Andrew Scott, at least in the film world, I know he was in Fleabag and lots of great theater, at least in the film world, is still relatively new to, I think, a lot of Academy members. But it's definitely possible. I mean, he has, I think, the international support from the Brits will rally behind this movie, but also the Americans as well. I can see strong support for this film. And then also, if you look at Andrew Haigh, who's the director of the film, he's got Charlotte Rampling a nomination for his film 45 Years, a few years back now. So it's a real possibility. It's not like his movies haven't gotten lead acting performances nominated before, but the Best Lead Actors category is usually less competitive than the Best Lead Actor category. I think this is going to be a competitive year. And so for me, the possibility of All the Strangers getting nominated for Best Picture, plus the fact that Andrew Scott's a little bit too young, a little bit too unknown, I think this will be like a cusp kind of performance, maybe Critics' Choice, but ultimately not enough for an Oscar nomination, but I'm not ruling it out. And then my other nomination, possible contender that I want to mention, is Barry Keoghan for Saltburn. This is another movie that I don't think is going to get nominated for Best Picture, but it's still a possible contender, more so than something like Rustin, but I don't think it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. And I think people like Barry Keoghan. I mean, let's not forget, last year he was nominated for The Banshees of Inisherin, but also he won the BAFTA for The Banshees of Inisherin. So he's well-liked, at least by members of the BAFTA and the Academy in terms of a nomination. So there's a strong sort of sign of support there. And this one, he's doing a little bit of a different performance. He's still got that sort of strange, weird energy that I think people appreciate for him, but he's also got a strong amount of charm from the film. And based on reading the reviews, we see a lot of people praising his performance, along with someone like a Rosamund Pike. So they're possible contenders, but I think Barry Keoghan, not a lot of people are talking about it, but I think sometimes you have to look. at movies that are not going to get nominated for Best Picture, but have interesting, bold performances. And Barry Keoghan definitely is on the track to be an actor that we talk about for many years to come. And let's not forget Emerald Fennell's last movie, Promising Young Woman, got Carey Mulligan a nomination for Best Lead Actress. So it's not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever. So I think Barry Keoghan, for a lot of people, are in like maybe they're his 7th, 8th, 9th. I think he's a lot stronger than some people think. And don't be surprised when he starts to be in the conversation because of how sort of bold and interesting the movie is and how his performance aligns with that tone. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your own personal rankings, 1 to 5, maybe some possible contenders. Tell me why I'm crazy of my picks in the comments down below. I love to hear that. If you're coming back to the channel, check out my other videos, Best Actress, Best Picture. I've given my predictions for those videos. Next week, we're going to be talking about the Best Supporting Actress category. Yep, so that'll be a lot of fun because that's a category where we really don't know any potential winners, and there's always a category like that every year, so it should be a lot of fun to discuss. But that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay tuned.